Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Laura and I like to craft stuff. I am here with some fabrics that, well, this one and this one I got from a quilt show recently. I guess maybe not so recent. It's been a while. But I got 2 yards of each of these, and they just are giving me that earthy 70s feel. And so I had already had this fabric in my stash. I had also already had this one in my stash. And I kind of feel like those two go together. And then, so I only have a yard of this and a yard of this. So we're going to do, I'm going to essentially, this is going to be one color family. I also picked up 2 yards of this fabric, which is also metallic-y. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned, the mushrooms are metallic. I love these two fabrics. Anyway, I got this fabric, which I'm going to include as this together as one color family. And then I got 4 yards of this fabric, which is the same as this one, has the same pattern. It's just got a black background instead of a ochre. So this one I have 4 yards of. So I went looking through the 1000 Great Quilt Blocks by Maggie McCormick Gordon. You know I love this book. I found this pattern, which has 4 colors. She calls this the Hartford. But what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to have the yellow fabric, I know it's blurry, I'm sorry, this fabric be the center square, and then the black will be everything that's white. And then maybe alternating the 2 colors for the white and the ochre. So this is my plan. I was thinking about sizing, and you know how I never use her sizes. So I am actually thinking I want the final squares to be 4 inches, which means for the half squares, I'm actually going to cut out 5 inches. Like a 5 by 5 square. Okay, I just checked the pattern, and I have to decide right now if I'm going to alternate. Because the top spiral star thing has regular just squares, so I need to cut 4-inch squares out for those, whereas the secondary one that looks like it's behind, that one just has half squares. So if I alternate, I'd have to cut out squares for each color family. Ooh, what do I want to do? I don't know. All right, I'm gonna have to think about that. First things first though, we have to iron all the fabrics, and then hopefully by the time I'm finished with that, I will have figured out my cuts. And I will begin cutting and then sewing the half square triangles, because that's where I love to start. All right, let's get to work. So thank you guys so much for watching and joining me today and in past videos. If you're new here, I try to post every other Tuesday. And yeah, I greatly appreciate everyone's kind words and encouragements. I am still enjoying quilting, and I have a feeling I have a lot more quilts to make, so, and maybe a dress or 2. So I decided that the fabrics where I only had a yard. So that is the white fabric with red and orange flowers, as well as the ochre fabric with mushrooms. Those are going to be the background stars. And then this mushroom fabric and the ochre with flowers were going to be the front stars. And I paired the two mushroom fabrics together and the two flower fabrics together for the stars. And it seemed to work out pretty well. I really liked the two combinations together, and for the most part, I had enough to make the kind of enough squares that I wanted. So I do cut a 4-inch strip and a 5-inch strip for the two fabrics that are going to be in front, and then the two fabrics that are going to be in back, I only had to cut the 5-inch strips for the half square triangles. And that worked out pretty well. I did not cut up all of my fabrics so that I could make further blocks should I need to. And while that did mostly work out, I wound up needing, by the end, one more block of the two flower fabrics. And I feel like I probably did have the fabrics to do it. Or was it the black fabric that I ran out of? Oh, I think it was the black. I ran out of the black fabric, so I had to make do with one block in the end. But you'll see it in the end. Sorry, that's all spoilers. For the most part, this worked out all right. I wish that I had more than 1 yard of this fabric and the other fabric that I had 1 yard of. And going forward, because those were fabrics that I had just picked up on a whim, I think if I do that in the future, I'm going to try to get at least 3 yards, because I feel like that's manageable in the kind of quilts that I like to do. I also have quite the stash, so who knows? I make no promises. If there's pretty fabric and I want a yard of it, I may grab pretty fabric for a yard. But I'm just saying. I think there are a lot of people, though. I've talked to some of the ladies that cut fabric at not Joann's, but the local fabric shop I like to go to, and they talk about how they'll just buy a yard of fabrics that they like. But they also have very large stashes, so I am trying to be good about not overbuying fabric, if there is such a thing. I won't say there is such a thing. You can have as much fabric as you want. I say so. Have as much fabric as you want. I just don't want to get too overwhelmed. Anyway, I'm still cutting here. I love mushroom fabric. Have I said that enough? I feel like I have, but just to say it again, I love mushroom fabric. So, like all of my quilts that have half square triangles, I sew 2 lines through the center of a square, and then I cut them in half, and that gives me 2 half square triangles. I was having some issues. Was it this quilt or in between this quilt and the next quilt? I was having some issues with my machine, so I actually pulled out my screwdriver and opened up my metal flap thing, and my goodness, the amount of fuzz that I had accumulated was surprising, even though it shouldn't have been. It should not have been as surprising as it was. It was quite a lot. I had quite a lot of digging to pull out all of it, but I did it. Not only did I do it, my machine is now working better than ever, so I'm quite proud of myself. Quite proud of myself. But also, clean out your machines every once in a while, if you feel like it. It could probably, use a clean out. I'm just saying, I'm not judging. No judging here. I definitely had gone quite a while without cleaning out my machine. It was definitely funny, but also knowing that I had to do all of that, but also I'm proud. Very proud.
So once I have all of those sewn up, I use my little ruler and I cut them all in half. I have to say, I like this process a little bit better than squaring them down, because I feel like I have to hold my ruler, and maybe this is me needing to get one of those square rulers that have the little divot in the center to do my half square triangles. I mean, it works out in the end, so I can't complain too much. Sometimes I'm tired of cutting and my arm gets a little sore. But it's also getting buff, my left arm specifically, because that's the one that's holding down to make sure it's not moving anywhere. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting quite the guns on that arm. Maybe I'm holding it too rough, but does that happen to you guys? I don't know. I really enjoy personally watching ironing open half square triangles. It's just so satisfying. Every time I watch a clip of ironing, I'm like, ugh. Anyway, here I am ironing them all open. One of the things that I noticed I realized halfway through that I needed an additional version of half squares. So I thought that I only needed the black with the fabrics, but then I realized that I needed half squares of the two colors in the block together. So for the mushrooms, the light mushrooms and the ochre mushrooms. So I had to go back and do that, which is, again, glad I didn't cut up all my fabrics so that I could do that. Also glad I didn't entirely sew up all of my cuts, which I could have. I was very tempted to, but I didn't, and that was good. That was very good. I need to pay a little bit more attention to the patterns. And then here I am trimming them down to size to be 4 inches. I realized that yes, technically I could probably save some fabrics by not giving myself an inch for trim down. Well, I guess a ½ inch once cut. But I personally want as much room as possible in case a block goes wonky, just because I don't have, there are plenty of times when I run out of fabric of a certain color and I don't want to go back and get more fabrics. Like, that's the worst, to stop in the middle of a project to go pick up more supplies because you didn't have enough. Awful, it's the worst. So that is up to you on how much room you want to give yourself to trim down. I've found it's easier. Yeah, I didn't have too many issues. One of the things, though, that I am realizing about a lot of these recent projects is just how similar the actual steps are. So, like, all of the steps are basically the same, but you put them together in a different way with different fabrics, and they look totally different. Funny how that works. So this block I've seen called the Ohio Star, but it's funny because in the book that I have, and maybe this is because she had to publish it and so she changed names so that she could publish it, because I imagine that all of these blocks were like, she didn't create them, right? They're older blocks that she compiled into a book. That being said, this block being called the Hartford, I've seen it called the Ohio Star. If you ever see me do a video where you see a block and it's named something else, please let me know, because I love looking up other people's examples of these blocks, usually after I have made my own version, just to see if what I wound up doing was at all similar to what everyone else was doing, but also to give me ideas if I ever wanted to do that pattern again, which so far I've yet to have a pattern that I have not wanted to do again, including this one. I've really liked the final layout of these. So as I was making this quilt, it kept screaming my friend's name, but I don't want to give it to her because I like this quilt. I want it for myself, even though I have so many quilt tops that need to be quilted and I have so many quilts for myself. But these colors were really screaming a friend's name, so maybe this quilt isn't for me. I don't know. It's so hard because I'm like, I love those fabrics so much, especially the mushroom ones. And while I was sewing, oh, by the way, while I was sewing the mushrooms together, I was trying to pay attention to what design would show up for the mushroom, the larger ochre mushroom fabric, because once it's trimmed down, the print is large enough that it may not show up. So I was really aware that when I was sewing down diagonally through the square, that I was getting mushroom stuff on both sides of the ochre fabric and not just all on one because of how the pattern was laid out. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. It's just something to note if you're working with a larger pattern, larger fabric. I'm sure those of you with lots of experience may already know this. It was funny, I was making a dress, gosh, a couple years ago before I'd kind of gotten into quilting, and I was talking about how I was surprised that a certain fabric hadn't flown off the shelves. And it was because the lady was like, well, this is so large of a print that when you go to quilt, it doesn't really show up very well. And so a lot of quilters are using these for quilts and they don't go for that large print. It's like, oh, that makes actually a lot of sense. Here I am laying out my design, or not my design, I guess, Maggie McCormick Gordon's design. For this, because there were so many moving parts, I did lay out all of my blocks in this way. And that was because I really wanted to make sure that I didn't sew them together incorrectly and then wind up with a whole bunch of blocks that were wrong. Not wrong, I guess, but just not what I was wanting. But I believe that there is a way. I mean, ultimately the pattern repeats, and so you could technically do it in parts. I don't know if it would be like the internal nine patch or taking one of the corners and just repeating that corner block. It is possible. That was not how I approached it. Just so you all know, I laid it out like this every time. And I personally like doing that because I like seeing it go from not being sewn together to sewn together and looking so good. But basically, I like to do sometimes chain stitching, so I'll sew one seam across multiple sets in one direction without cutting, and then flip all of those open and fold them over in the other direction and sew them the other way. And that was what I did here. So that was me flipping them over to make sure that they were all going in the same direction, and I was sewing on the right side because that sometimes happens where I mix up my blocks. So that was how I went about completing most of this. Just did that over and over and over again. Now showing you the other side. And then I sew that center strip and then I put them all three together. I do believe that I ironed all of the strips before putting them together in that final block. And that, yep, okay. That is something that I have started doing more, is stopping and ironing in between sewing sessions, because it really does help. I know that there are certain areas where it's like I'm too lazy and I don't want to do it. And then there are other times where it's like, okay, yes, I have to take this step because it really does look better. And it makes it easier when they're all ironed and flat. So I have been ironing more in between my blocks and doing my best to nestle seams. But I do my best, but if the seam is wanting to go in one direction, I'm letting it do what it wants. Okay, I'm not going to fight with it that hard. So one of the things, as I was going along making these blocks, I actually started to get a little nervous that the mushroom fabrics and the flower fabrics were going to look good together because they were in different blocks. I was really starting to worry that they were going to clash in the final product. But now, having finished this, spoiler, I think it looks great. I don't recall how many blocks I did. I had one more block of the mushroom fabrics than I did of the flower fabrics. But I basically tried to lay it out like a chessboard of alternating every other and then staggering them for every row. I had them sewn together in fours because I was able to do that in my room and not take up the living room. But for this, once I had finished my fours, then I needed to lay it out for that final product. So I am taking over the living room here to lay that out. But on the bottom, because I went 4 by 5, so in total I think I have 20 blocks, right? The math is correct. I had that bottom row goes mushroom, ochre, mushroom, mushroom. And here is the final result. I love this quilt so much. Not only does it feel very classic, it also like 1800s or whatever. It also feels very 70s. It feels so 70s, and I love it. The 70s, not everybody loves the aesthetic. I love it. Some of it, some of the time, not all the time, but this I love. I really do enjoy this quilt a lot. I may, because it's so thin and narrow, I would say this is probably, I'm terrible about measuring my final blocks, but I would say this is probably a twin or a full. And I love my queens. So a part of me is like thinking maybe I'll add a border to it when I come to quilt it. I don't know. We'll see. What do you think? I know most people like borders on their quilts. Also, it helps when you're binding and taking it in that final bit that you're not cutting off any of the blocks if you have a border. But I'm also like, no, this is finished. I love it and I am done and I want to move on. So it is folded in my closet at the moment. I would have to probably get more fabric to do a border. I feel like some kind of yellow or ochre would look so cute. Or I saw recently somebody did a video where they were doing fancy stuff, and so they were sewing things together, and then when they trimmed it off, they got some other like block out of that, and then they turned those, they were like half squares or something that were smaller, and then they turned that into a border, and I still have fabric left over of some of these colors. It wasn't enough to do an ochre flower block to help me out on the final layout, but I do have some of the other colors, so that's a possibility. It's a possibility, but I'm not doing it right now. Again, I want to thank everyone who has been following along my videos and who have been watching me recently. I really do greatly appreciate it. Thank you if you're new here. Thank you if you want to subscribe. If you don't, that's cool too. I'm glad you got to hang out. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Okay. Bye.